So why the supervisor matters, which is kind of what you've answered in a way, isn't it? What you're looking for. And I like this definition that she's given. The supervisor is gatekeeper, mentor, and advocate, particularly within the context of underrepresented or marginalised students, which is what we're doing here. Because if somebody doesn't really understand the problems you face, even with all the goodwill in the world, they may not be able to help you. But if you've got a supervisor who's kind of had that same lived experience as you, it helps them to put your difficulties. If things aren't going well at home, it's very hard for things to go well within the university environment with your PhD. And also, you might be able to yourself better represent yourself and the difficulties that you're going through with that rapport that you have, understanding that this, and feeling trusted that this person will listen to you. I don't know if anyone else has any more comments.
So one of the things to think about in terms of outcomes is not only passing the PhD or getting the doctorate, but also beyond getting the doctorate. You know, having a supervisor, that's a relationship. And if it's a good relationship, it's one that will support you throughout the whole of your academic career. So your supervisors will be the ones who are writing your initial references for you. During the PhD, if you want to apply for any project funding, apply for any overseas stays, etc., it's your supervisor who will be the first port of call for that. So it's really important that you remember these other outcomes as well. When you graduate, when you have your Bible, when you're looking for your first academic post, it's your supervisor who will be writing those references for you. It's your supervisors who will really be have a big role to play in the extent to which your PhD journey is a springboard into your academic career. So it's those other outcomes to think about as well as just the doctorate itself.
The last bullet point there, Patricia knows that 50% of PhD students don't complete, and a lot of that is directly or indirectly linked to the quality of support from the supervisory team. And I can give a first-hand example. When we started the University of Sheffield, started what was called the BAME Staff Network. It's now the Staff Race Equality Network. At that time it was the BAME Network. I think I was co-chair, and an ethnic minority student came up to me, and she was really depressed, almost at the point of depression really, by this stage. I was thinking of pulling out. She was a student, but she came to me as staff just for support, for someone to talk to. And she was an international student. She'd come from her country and had always been a star, you know. So she came confident, and the supervisor said to her, one of the things he said was, none of the past PhD students that come from your country have done well. You know, so I don't expect you to do well either. And she became scared of asking questions, she became scared of going to class, she became scared of doing anything. And she started doing badly. She wasn't, her experiments weren't working because she didn't want to ask him because he already had this, so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Essentially, she started doing badly. So with support, we did talk to them, we members of the BAME Staff Network, as it was called at that time, and she had people to talk to. And then we introduced her to the student union, and they had a BAME representative. And just that gave her the confidence. She would have dropped out, she didn't. She actually ended up finishing. So I suppose one of the things is when you start, meet others. Form a group of people that you trust, that you can talk to. And there will be allies, there'll be white allies, but find people that you can talk to. Don't go through it alone.
Also, it's worth remembering, I mean, it is a supervisory team. Most universities, I don't know if that's true of all, have more than one supervisor in a supervisory team. So you do have your principal supervisor, but you have a second person as well. And it's really important, especially when you're not getting on, to make good use of both the people on the team as well as your peer support, which is your PhD student networks, as Amaka said. And I think also it's important to remember that in addition to that, you have your PGR director. So don't leave it until it gets so bad that you don't have a way back. Recognize that most universities have set it up as teams for precisely this reason. The relationship between a supervisor and supervisee is very individual. You know, it's not, it has nothing to do with how good the supervisor is relative to how good the student is. It's just how your personalities interact, really.
And that's a good point. Also in Sheffield, you have your supervisors, but you have somebody who's completely not related to the project at all. As a pastoral sort of supervisor, there are fixed meetings. You have to meet with that person. Is it every 3 months or something? But I always make it clear, because problems don't arise every 3 months, like clockwork, right? As soon as what we may say, as soon as you detect that there are issues, if you don't feel you can talk to the 2 supervisors in the team or the PGR super lead, you can talk to your pastoral supervisor if the university has one. But the best sort of supervisory relationship, I think, is if your supervisor and you have an almost mentor-mentee, as well as the research, supervision. So this slide, I think, is speaking to the types of styles that exist. And in the top left corner, we can see a supervisor who gives you high support, very supportive, but they don't really direct you. And this might be fine if you're somebody with visual. You know, you can think of the problems, you can see the problems, and you can see the ways of solving them. And they give you support and say, yeah, go ahead. But if you are struggling with ideas or how to solve the problem, that's kind of a difficult supervisor to have. In the bottom left is the worst case scenario: low support and low direction. They don't even support the few ideas that you have, and they don't offer any ideas to you to help you. And in the bottom right, low support but high direction. The kind of person that maybe will be meeting you virtually from the beach in Thailand or something, and be saying, yes, that's good, but they're not, and they'll tell you what to do, but they're not helping you to do it. Yes? And then in the top is high support and high direction. They tell you what to do, they tell you how to do it, they tell you when to do it. Is that good or bad? What do you think? Who wants that type of supervisor? Well, which supervisor do you want? Who wants the high support, low direction? Okay?
Yeah, probably, because you still get a lot of freedom. They're not really
Yeah. That's what I would like, actually. I don't really particularly like being told what to do. And if I've got a project and I know what I want to do in my project, I want you to say, this is the person that you need to meet, these are the funding opportunities, this is a conference you can go to. I don't want you to tell me how to do my project, so fair enough. Who likes low support, low direction? I'd be surprised if anybody did. Actually, you probably wouldn't be here, right? What about low support and high direction?
Probably wasn't the word.
Can I make up my own category? Yeah, there might be one in there. Can I make up my own category?
Yes, go ahead.
High support, medium direction.
Exactly, something like that. We don't want extremes. And the top right-hand corner, the danger of that is to become a very dependent person. Whereas the whole point of a PhD is to come out of it as an independent researcher who can then create your own group and ask your own questions and write your own grants. Yeah. I like a PhD student that challenges me. It says, why are we doing it this way? You know, and sometimes, of course, if you say to them, this is not going to work because, and they want to persevere, that maybe can sometimes become irritating because time is going. But generally, a supervisor doesn't necessarily want you to agree and do everything exactly their way.
A lot depends. Somebody said about the stage of the PhD. So I'm an economist, and the way it works in Reading is you tend to have 3 chapters that are results-related chapters, but it means that each of the 3 chapters has a different research question. So when the PhD student first starts, even if they have a pretty good proposal, which they're very wedded to, they probably don't have the 3 research questions very well set out. So at that point, there's a certain amount of direction that's required, which forces them to identify the questions. Not that you tell them the questions, but you do have to insist that they work through their thoughts to pick up those questions. After that, I think you were saying you think your supervisor knows more. Actually, they don't. For most of us, the topic very quickly goes away from what is our core interest, right? But that doesn't matter because the PhD student actually picks up really quickly. And at that point, it does become quite low direction, but you know approximately what makes a good chapter or what makes a good set of analyses. And then it really shifts quite a lot to, yeah, I mean, you can pretty much leave the student to themselves. Then when you come down to the writing up stage, again, there is a little bit more direction because it's quite specific how you write up for a PhD. You know, what is required, what's not required, how to put in these references, footnotes, all of those are quite specific with regard to which discipline you're in. So then it can become, again, a little bit more directive. But yeah, it depends on where you are in that process.
And I think following on from some of the Menti poll questions and answers, at the very beginning, when you're trying to write a proposal, you haven't even got your PhD, you actually want somebody who's giving you high support and high direction. I think at that very early stage, if they're not answering your emails on time, if they're not responding, if they're not making any comments at all on the protocol, or helping you with whether you need the ethics or how to, at that beginning stage, if they're not giving you the support you need, that's not the supervisor for you. And also, even if because the supervisor is not a rigid human being, if they see that you're needing support at that stage and they're not giving it, that's not a good sign of a good supervisor. That is a person to avoid, essentially. Okay. So this was where I think that she was going to come with pro forma, you know, with case studies. She hasn't come, so we haven't got those case studies. I think we will all, maybe we can talk about our own examples. So real life student supervisor dynamics, and Nana has just talked a little bit about her supervisor experience. Examples of positive engagement and healthy practice, examples of negative engagement and unhealthy practice, the impact, and then what you would suggest. So have you got a negative? Thank you.
No.
Positive.
Sorry.
No, not your own personal.
Positive. No.
Are we all going to only have positives, right? I don't have a negative to give.
Sorry. I mean, I guess one of the things that has struck me over the years, I've had PhD students, very different types. But I think the one thing that is really helpful is when a PhD student doesn't get defensive. And I've noticed, I've had 2 or 3 PhD students who have a certain amount of confidence, so when you give a comment, they just turn around and say, okay, so what do you mean by that? What do you expect from it? Rather than becoming very nervous. And I will say that it's because I'm this other kind of person. So when my PhD student made negative comments about me, I would just go into my shell. It would worry me a lot. So I recognize when I see PhD students who have the capacity to take my comments, and then if they don't get what I'm saying, actually turn around and say, can you explain that? How could I have done that better? I think that's quite a remarkable thing for a PhD student to be able to do. I think that's really positive engagement.
Did you say it was negative again?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
As well.
So this is an example of somebody that I studied with, and part of the reason for the issue was because they each had different expectations from the relationship. So the researcher wanted more support, and the supervisor was actually a low support type of supervisor because they were very busy doing other things. And that's because they were very successful, so they had lots of non-academic but academic related activities. So that was a negative engagement because the student was constantly expecting more and not receiving it, and it ended up being quite unhappy for both of them. So when you're choosing the supervisor, don't just go for the big names, because big names are not necessarily available to help you. Some are. It's a personal thing, but just be aware that sometimes the high flyers are high flyers because they're always out there somewhere else doing a lot of work and don't have the capacity to focus as much on their students. So there needs to be some matching as well.
I have high expectations of my students. So sometimes when we begin, it can cause a level of friction. If I don't perceive, they will actually, I can't do this, is what they will start off by saying. You're going to. So that can cause a level of friction at the beginning, but all of them inevitably at the end are very grateful. So they will end up with the papers that they thought they would never get. They go to the conferences that they thought they would never go to, and they will thank me. But sometimes there is difficulty at the beginning. And this idea of defensiveness, I have a student who's just finished now, but so defensive. Everything has a reason, and that reason is never to do with him. You know, and that can be that you don't progress. You actually have to sit back, and so sometimes the issue is yours and not the supervisor's. And we have to accept that. I've learned in the course of things too. I haven't brought down my expectations, because I'm better at voicing them in a more understanding way, especially to the less confident students who don't think that they will ever get the paper. But there's no reason why they shouldn't. All of them are able to.
So, when you were talking about negative engagement, I currently have a PhD student. There's no comment you can make that he needs to engage with. None. So I'll say, oh, you know, these are 2 papers you might want to read. No, they don't deal with this topic. And you're thinking, I mean, seriously? And the thing is, because nowadays we write these comments into these live documents, you can actually see the response to the comments. And by the end of it, I simply say, there is no progress in that chapter, but I simply say, fine, submit it.
Do you?
I do, because there's nothing I can do. There is no engagement with the comments. And of course, it's submitted to a journal and it's rejected. But then there's no question asked about why was it rejected. But sometimes you have to accept defeat, because after many rounds of comments, if the comments are not being taken into account, that's it.
Just changed supervisors. She was actually something like 18 months in, and it was way too late to be starting all over again. They're very strict in Sheffield in terms of when you must complete, and they won't let you They won't let you go over that time. So there was delay in terms of just getting over the shock, the experience, trusting other people, and even trusting me. And I was the second supervisor after she changed, so she changed the whole team. And the first supervisor was in fact at Hallam, so it was one of these cross-university type things. But she didn't change the topic at 18 months. That's been my only experience. And the not getting on was all the characters. It was more. It wasn't the topic. It was just that these people did not get on at all with the main supervisor in particular.
Yes, I have also taken over students in year 3 is one.
Year 3?
Yeah, year 3 one day supervisors left the university. And it's also not in my subject area. So she was in marketing, and I'm in supply chain management. I think what I did, she was a very good student, by the way. So I think for my role, I thought it was not my role to ask her question, to tell her what to do. My role was more ask her question, what have you achieved so far? She said, okay, I have decided my research methodology already. I'm about to go out to collect the data. I think what I was doing was, what do you think this is the right methodology for you? How you are going to do the sampling? I think more I did was asking questions to make sure she was doing the right thing on the track. I think that tells me the knowledge I didn't have a lot of knowledge in marketing. I know a little bit, but it's not really. But I don't think that's really a big issue for supervisors, especially when you have supervised a lot of students. You have seen different students how they progress. So there is a more, I think, on the progress check side. So I wouldn't worry about this.
I've had several students that I pick up, and there are many reasons why that might happen. I mean, it can be just because the supervisor has left, so there's no relationship breakdown. It's just that you pick up a student from another supervisor, and in some cases it can be because the relationship has broken down, or because the student has been given major corrections and they've chosen not to continue with the supervisory team. Just similar to Xiaofeng, I think it's a case of just finding some common ground, negotiating ways of working. And sometimes it does take a while, but I think from your perspective, it's about being clear about what works for you, how you want that relationship to work, how often you need their feedback, how you want that feedback. I think it's really important to be quite open, because each supervisor does have a particular way of working. One of the things that I don't particularly do is have just a meeting. I always want something in writing at least a week before, so that I've had a chance to feedback, then we discuss the feedback in the meeting. But that doesn't always suit students all the time, so occasionally there will be a meeting where you have to have that conversation if they're struggling, but generally that's the way that I would work. So I think it's just important in that situation to be clear about what works for you, and in any supervisory relationship to use the first meeting to do that, to establish ways of working.
And to remember that they are the supervisors. You have to be polite, you have to be respectful. We don't have to do everything that they say just because they've said it. I was mentoring too, I was individual one-on-one mentoring meetings, but the contrast. So one, within about 6 months, changed her supervisor because the supervisor wanted to do things in a particular way and actually had no knowledge of the topic. It just had a general of the specific. The area was her area, but not the specifics that the student wanted to do. And there was another professor in the same university who was more attuned to what she wanted to do, and she spoke to that professor and swapped. And part of the mentoring was going through that, the courage to do that. And then the other one was actually the other way around in a different university, 4 supervisors. And the 4 supervisors disagreed, and she was in the middle of them. And I just used to sit and listen to her. My advice was maybe find the one that you get on with the best and speak to that person and say, my PhD is not moving because of all of these disagreements. And I really need, or who is the main supervisor didn't appear to have the same assertiveness as somebody who wasn't the main supervisor, but they were all of them battling in their university, this area. It's very difficult. I think you have to be able to, you are the student, but that there, at some level you have to find somebody who can assert for you, if you can't assert for yourself, somebody to advocate for you, if you can't do it yourself.
I would say in terms of the meeting, I encourage my students to set the agenda and send that to me a couple of days in advance. So think about, more actively about what you want covered in the meeting, what questions you want to focus on, as well as what work you want to have the supervisor read. But I don't write the agenda, it's always the student. So.
Yeah. As well.
Because you have some people that are really awful.
Absolutely.
And they just go in there to embarrass the student and to make them into some kind of emotional wreck. And you don't want somebody like that to externally examine your student.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to knowing if they are subject experts, it's good if you know something else about them, right? And if somebody if you don't know them personally, then do you know somebody who knows them and has worked with them before? So you have to do so much research when you're trying to find an external examiner who is going to examine your student. So that's part of the role of the supervisor, the main supervisor as well, is to get an appropriate examination team. Yeah.
We've been talking about this really, it's not just academic guidance, it's a structural relationship of power to the supervisor, gatekeeping with real implications for your life, for your PhD, for where you go afterwards. Because actually a good supervisor will help you look beyond the PhD and what will you do next, the postdoc, if you stay in academia, which will you be in this university, can they help you move to a different university? And you know, it says good supervision is often unequally distributed because of the privilege, and also because of maybe unconscious biases. That supervisor that says to the student, people that can come from your country don't do well. Why is he even accepting them? It would almost be better not to accept them, but then you accept them and you put them on this negative cycle, you know, and that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So supervisors may unconsciously invest more in students who mirror them, and that's why we need more black female professors, so that we can be mirroring people like you and like ourselves, you know, to help. And that's maybe 1% of us. And we were trying, I think, Donna was trying to set up the Generation Delta student network. How many students did you have? You couldn't find any. Not enough students.
No.
At our conference last year, people walked in and to see so many black PhD women, black and Asian, black in the widest context. Some of them said they couldn't believe it because they were maybe one or two, and so few in the university and in different schools and departments and faculties that they don't bump into each other. And all of this can feed into your success or failure or your confidence and how you feel, and supervisors as well. So, shifting from checklist to critique, not just do they support me, but how do they understand their own power and positionality?
And also, how do they use their power
And
to support
positionality,
me
exactly.
as a junior researcher? That's very important.
That's very important. Make space for, equity informed supervisor, I've not heard of that term before. Make space for culturally located research. That's important, isn't it? Phoebe was talking about diet and our own native diets. Nobody's going to be wondering about that if you don't come from, if you're British and you eat fish and chips, right? So it's important that the questions that are asked, sickle cell disease in the context of health, and all this sort of thing. Name whiteness and inequality in their field. We have the courage to do that. Acknowledge harm and repair power imbalances. Should be comfortable with adopting the role of learner, so the supervisor shouldn't always take the high ground and feel they know it all. Sometimes, and often actually, as Uma was saying, you know, I do children's bones, but if you're taking a specific question, you might be more expert in that topic. You're the expert, and that's what I try and say to my PhD students. Actually, you're the expert, and that helps when they're going into the Viva. You spent 4 years answering this one question. You are now the expert. So supervisor who's humble enough to learn from you, that's a good thing. And central relational accountability. Center relational accountability. What does that mean?
So it's the accountability of the relationship between the student and the supervisor should be at the center of
everything.
Of everything.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I agree with that, if that's the understanding. I feel as if my centre is to make sure, my thing is to make sure the student learns and grows and gets their PhD and is able to be independent. So I have a number of students that come from different countries like Saudi Arabia, Libya, and I don't want them to do studies that they can't, that don't relate to what goes on in Saudi Arabia or Libya, because they're going to go back. And I want them to be the next expert and to keep doing that research and to grow. So I personally will centre it more on the student and their outcomes. Maybe I've misunderstood.
I think for me, what that means is that the supervisor, your relationship with it's a relationship, basically, right? You have your responsibilities, the supervisor has their responsibilities, right? But each of you come together in a relationship. So you need to be accountable for that relationship. Both of you need to be be accountable for that relation.
Mhm.
So that's what I understand by
Yes.
that, right?
Okay.
So
Ah.
you need to be accountable for that relationship.
And sometimes a good supervisor won't just give you the answer. You can easily forget and you may not understand. They direct you to the papers and then you read that and you learn and you understand the point of your PhD and you remember it better than just being told the answer by your supervisor. So you haven't got to say, my supervisor never answers my questions. They have answered your question. They've told you what papers to read.
But I think that notion of constellation of care is really important, because I know when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor wasn't really a subject. He didn't really know the subject I was doing. But he was a good supervisor because, you know, he knew the process, he knew what I needed to get done. And I was getting worried because I wasn't sure I was along the right path, topic-wise. And my second supervisor suggested this professor that was at another university, and he said, he's a subject expert, you need to meet this guy. And honestly, that guy was the best. He wasn't part of my supervision team. I had this relationship with him outside of the supervision, and he was the one that I thought was instrumental to me getting that PhD. And we were just friends long after. Sadly, he's passed away now, but he was just my career coach, topic coach, everything. And it was really that constellation of care that I don't think I could have done without. So,
in having a meeting like this, one of the questions that one might want to ask is, why do we need to have this meeting? Why do we have to? Why do we need this meeting? And the simple answer to that is that it is important that you know, representation from across the whole of the community is there at all stages and levels in terms of the things that people want to do. And so specifically for academia, and I understand that most of the people in here are either PhD students, professors, or aspiring to be PhD students. And that's really a great thing to do, because I think for the colleagues in here, it would be very unusual if you called a meeting, a general meeting, and invited people to come, and then you had a meeting for people like this who are actually senior people in higher education. And really, that suggests that there is actually a deficit. So my approach to thinking about these sort of issues and responding to them is essentially by starting from the point of looking at the reality and looking at the data. Because you can argue with my views and my principles, but you can't really argue with the data, because data doesn't lie. So my question always when people ask me that they want to do things, I say, show me the data. And of course people do say that you can manipulate data in various ways to show you what, but I'm talking about raw data here. And so you look at the numbers. And I'll tell you why that is important. Because if you look at the data will be able to show you whether there is actually a deficit. And in this case, if you actually look at the number of ethnic minority, particularly women who are doing PhDs, there is a huge deficit there. And once you understand what the deficit is, when you try to do something, then at least you know when the dial moves, because the data again changes and then the number changes. So it is very pleasing for me to see the large turnout here, because if you, and I'm saying things here that I know that you're very familiar with, if you look at the representation of ethnic minorities or minoritized students in university, and that can go up to 10%, even higher than that. In some cases, way above that. But actually, when you look from undergraduate and then you look to PhD, the biggest drop actually, although I know and you know, the number of female professors who are ethnic minorities is actually very, very small. I'm not even sure what the number is.
No, I don't know. They're still
trying
to get it to
it's about 20 or more.
It's more than, it's going to be somewhere about 80.
Okay, it's 90, yeah. Okay, so that's really a small number because there's about 22,000.
It's less than 1%.
Yeah, less than 1%. But so we know that actually that is quite a challenging space, but actually the biggest drop is between undergraduate and postgraduate. That's where the biggest drop actually occurs. And in my own subject in chemistry, it is quite huge, but I think it's actually quite general. And of course, if you're going to keep that, and people often refer to the pipeline, if you're going to keep that pipeline flowing, then of course you need to look at that initial stage. And if you're going to get those that become lecturers, that actually become professors, they usually need to take that first step of doing a PhD or doing some postgraduate studies. And of course, then the question there is whether everybody has got the information that they need, because information is actually power here, whether they have the networks that they need. Because often you need somebody to say to somebody else that I know this individual who's going to be a very good student. I mean, higher education is not a huge community, but it's very networked. And unless you are actually benefiting from those networks, for somebody to put in a good word for you, to sort of recommend you to somebody else, unless you're aware of those networks and you're that way networked. I'm not saying that it is impossible for you to succeed, but it just makes it a little bit harder to do that. And I have a very clear understanding that some sections of the community can be disadvantaged in that way. And I think the people who are sitting in here belong, unfortunately, to that group. And for me, that's why today is really important. But I really do not want so much to focus on the barriers and the challenges, because I know that those exist. I want to focus more of what you'd like to do, what you can do, and what the future can be for you. Because it's quite clear to me that even when the statistics show us that there are deficits, that doesn't tell your story. That is not your story. Your story is still yet to be told. And you have a huge amount of control in terms of what your story will be. And so the statistics should not define what you do or what you become or the decisions that you make. And so at that point, I suggest that actually you have relative freedom in terms of what you do, and you're really very much then what happens next is determined by your ambitions. And I have something that people always remember me saying, is that the best way of making sure that nothing happens is to do nothing. If you do something, something might happen. And I think you have done something by coming here today. You have no clue where this is going to go. And really it is for you to decide how you're going to proceed, how you process the information that you have received today, and the next steps that you're going to make. Yes, the networking, yes, the information is going to be very, very helpful. And I don't know of anybody who's been successful in life, whether they are a politician or a sports person or an academic, who has not had somebody else hold their hand. So we all need somebody to hold our hand. We all need somebody to mentor. I mean, I am considered, with others here, being fairly senior in late career, but I still have people I go to when I want to start things, and I have people who held my hand all along. And there are people here who I'm sure will want to hold those who are thinking about PhDs hand and help you along. But despite all of that, at the end of the day, you have essentially to do it. And I have always been clear that when I'm talking to a group like the one here, it is never really about ability, because clearly those sitting here are amongst the best of your own generation. So it's not about ability, but it's about seizing those opportunities. It is about actually having the support that you need, and then being able to do what you want to do. So I do hope that today will have been very, very useful to you in the decisions that you make here at the University of Sheffield. Of course, we, in the work that I lead and the work that Amark and others lead, we are very aware that representation is quite low in certain parts of our university. And the reason why we want representation to be higher is not because it is a good thing to do or it's the fair thing to do. Of course, that is correct. That is the case. But it's actually about being the best that we can be. Because I believe that a team that works at the highest level performance has to be a diverse team, and has to be an inclusive team that actually includes the community, that has the face of the community. And so for us here at Sheffield, I always say to my colleagues that if we are not having a full representation here, if we are not having this X number of female professors, we can't multiply, I'm sorry to say this several times over, we are actually not performing as best as we can. So there are probably things that you need to do, but actually the higher education sector needs you. It needs you to make those next steps if that's what you want to do, and to then, of course, excel and do whatever you want to do. So anyway, I hope today has been good, and I look forward where it's possible hearing what the next steps might be post this excellent meeting. So thank you very much.